pretty. Yeah.
Good morning, CTA. How are you this very cold morning?
Good morning.
Cold.
Crisp.
So we're going to get started in just a minute. I know you probably may have already signed the sign-in sheet. Seen that going around? Okay. Sorry, we're a little late this morning. Just want to welcome you here. If you know, the microphones in front of you are live all the time, so if you're not speaking and you might be coughing, or if you can just push them up, or as Randall's doing, push them way away from you. Also, your phones, cell phones, if they're near that and they go off, it may affect the mic, so if you could just kind of be cognizant of that. But good morning. I think we're ready to really dive into this. I'm going to have Mary pass out our, well, actually, wait. I think we've talked about you guys giving us your proposals first.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's why we decided to go ahead and be kind. Since it's your house, we'll let you go ahead and go first.
Okay. Well, we're going to hand out the proposals. Mary has them right now in a folder.
Okay.
This is our proposals for language. It does not include salary at this point. As we discussed after negotiations yesterday, we after hearing from Mr. Katz at the board meeting, he talked about a possibility of a 2-year deal. We're kind of intrigued by that because, we're going to run right into reopening for next year in April. So if you have some kind of plan in mind to do a 2-year something so we didn't have a reopener in April, we'd certainly be interested in looking at it. So that's why we're going to hold off on our salary till we've seen what you want to propose so that we can gauge where our money and how far our money can go if we do a 1-year versus a 2-year. So we definitely like to see your money proposals before we hand out ours.
Okay. Well, I can tell you now that our money proposals will more than likely be for 1 year. Because of that, a couple things. The interest was there, but then we have the problem with our new state leader, and then the next round starts basically in 2 months.
Correct.
So, and we feel that we can probably go ahead and settle this year, and then begin to work on time for next year's round in April.
Okay, we can certainly look at that. So we'll start off looking at our district proposals. The first one is Article 2, Section F. This was a change as a result of some claims we've had recently through risk management. If you look, it starts on page 4. And I did on this one because there were small changes. I did little arrows on the side so you can see where we have some changes made. And basically, the language in the contracts talks about, in cases of an assault upon an employee. We've had some cases recently where I know the intent of that was if a teacher is physically touched, basically, is what they thought of as an assault, kind of the layperson's definition of an assault. Well, under the law, assault is the threat of physical danger. So we wanted to change this to where it's battery, because battery is what it, is the actual physical touching, which is what the intent of this language was about. Because they talk about physical injuries, but they talk about an assault. So they're two separate things. So what they taught us in law school, assault is when I pull my fist back. Battery is when I hit you with it. So the assault is the threat, the battery is the touching. So we wanted to change this language so that it reflected what the intent was as far as we were concerned, that it changed from assault to battery. And there's a case, then it starts in paragraph 8. We're just changing assault to battery. And that happens further down in 10, and also 10A1, 10A2, and in part of 11. But we've also added in here that where they talked about in case of injury to the employee, and that's in 8C, we wanted to add the language serious physical injury. We've had some claims come through that were a little ridiculous in nature as to what they were claiming as injury. But the language is what it is in the contract, so we felt that the intent was that it was serious physical injury, and I mean something other than a paper cut, something that we would consider, or most normal people would consider to be a serious physical injury. And then, like I said, in 10, it's the same kind of change, and in 11, we just had to change the language because when employees who are physically assaulted, we changed it. who are seriously injured as a result of a battery. Because again, it's that language assault. If people are using it as the normal person thinks of it as an assault, battery is what that normal person thinks of in the legal world. And so that's all the changes we want to make to 2F, is just clean that up. So then going to 2G, you'll see we've made quite a few changes in this provision. This is employee evaluation. And as we've discussed in JANK, one of the problems we're having is that JANK has the authority to change the CTES, which is a Classroom Teacher Evaluation System handbook. And then we have language in the contract that at this point doesn't match what we're actually doing any longer, because we've made enough changes to the evaluation system through JANK and negotiating in that group that they no longer align. So what we'd like to do is what we've discussed previously, and what we is take out the meat of this provision and put it all in the handbook. Most of it is already in there. I've had staff working on an analysis to make sure everything is there already. There's a couple of things we're going to need to talk about in JANK that need to go in the CTES handbook, but they're minor. And so you'll see we've kind of changed this provision a little bit to talk about, instead of, and there were some things like attempts to link. This actually does, the evaluation says, does link student learning growth and instructional practices to the evaluation process. We've been doing this now for a number of years, and the language that was currently in here was kind of aspirational for when we were starting out this process. So that's why you'll see some of those changes are just verbiage changes to make it more that this is what the world we are in now. So you'll see that there were minor changes in the top first paragraph, and then we take everything out up until page 11 is where we have language that we're continuing to keep that would stay in this provision. So the beginning of this section in the contract would talk about, we have an evaluation system, the policies and procedures are all contained in the CTES. So when then you get down to this, the commitment to continuous study and review, it talks about JANK, and that this is JANK's role. And we took out in the first paragraph and the Classroom Teacher Evaluation System handbook because we added a paragraph below which talks about that all the evaluation instruments, procedures are contained in a separate document called the CTES that is incorporated by reference herein. So it makes it a part of the contract, but it allows us to change it as needed through JANK, through that negotiating committee that we've set up. And then we add on the last page, on page 12, we've added some language we want you to consider adding. In the past couple of years, maybe more last year, when we were making some serious changes to the evaluation system, we were limiting the number of elements and domains. We had difficulty getting there. It took us a long time to get there. So we've added language to kind of put a fire under both parties and give us an incentive to actually try and reach consensus a little quicker than what we've been doing. And so in this case, because, Thea, you and I have talked about what do we do if we reach an impasse at JANK? And we didn't really know what we would do, because my thought is, because JANK is negotiating, JANK would take it to impasse. Your thought was, well, we'd have to call the whole negotiating team together and try and negotiate it again with this bargaining team. And then if we couldn't reach consensus, then it would have to go to impasse. And I'm not sure which one of us is correct and how that would work. It would be one of those things that we'd have to take it to PERC and have them tell us, and I don't really want to have that happen. I'd rather that the parties work together and figure out a way to, what do we do if we can't reach consensus, and what does that mean, and how long should that take? So we're proposing that if we can't reach consensus after 3 meetings on any one little issue, then the chief of HR with 1 staff member, along with CTA, would have 2 representatives, would then have a smaller group that would come to the table and try and reach consensus. If we couldn't reach consensus with that group, then we would call in a mediator through FMCS, and that's a free service through the federal government as long as they're open and operating. It's the Federal Mediation and Conciliation Services. We've used them in level 2As with grievance process to have them come in and try and mediate an agreement there. And then if we can't reach an agreement, if mediation would fail, so we've tried 3 different times at this rate to do this. if mediation fails, then the association would then institute an impasse proceeding under PERC, just so that we would then get a resolution and know where we're going with that. Then the last section is procedural defects, and we've talked about this too, that sometimes if an administrator doesn't evaluate an employee properly, let's say they don't do an informal, or they don't notify them of the date and time of the formal, or they don't provide them feedback within 10 days. What's happened in the past is that they grieve it, but they wait till the end of the school year to see what their overall evaluation looks like, and if they're not happy with it, then they aggrieve it. And all that we're left with, the remedy that we can provide, is to invalidate that observation that was invalid, that was done improperly. If the employee then didn't have, let's say it was on the formal, if they didn't have a second formal observation, then that employee is deemed to be unevaluated. It's as if they were on leave that year and there wasn't enough time to evaluate them. And I don't think that's fair to the employee. So what we'd like to do is institute a procedural defects kind of clause here, so that if something like that happens, if an employee has a formal observation and the principal is going back on the old language and says, I'm going to evaluate on the week of. And so then the employee could then, within 5 days of the observation actually occurring without giving them the date and the time, they could file a grievance. And they'd have to do it within 5 days of the event. We would have 10 days. It would go right to labor relations. We would have 10 days to have a hearing. And if it was done incorrectly, then the principal would have to go back in and reevaluate that person. And the reason why we wanted to have those very short timelines is so that we do have time to give them the remedy that is the true remedy they would need, which is having the observation done correctly. And if it's that they didn't give them feedback within 10 days, that observation is invalidated. They have to go back in, and it gives them a second opportunity to do what they need to do, and then the principal to do it correctly, and also for the employee to get what they need, and so they're not, at the end of the year, end up not evaluated, because if they're not evaluated, they're not effective or highly effective for purposes of best and brightest, or for any raises that might be negotiated. So we would ask that you would give this some serious consideration to fix some of those problems that we're having, and then all the other issues about the evaluation would truly be controlled by JANK. It would be in the CTS handbook, so the employees have one place to look. And we could update that CTS handbook as we went in JANK. We could send out the newsletter, as we've been doing, and saying these are the changes we've made, and have them immediately, once that the parties agree upon the changes, have it immediately then fixed in the CTS handbook, so it would be a live document that is correct when you look at it every day. All right, so the next proposal is Article 2, Section Q, and this is the ESE employees' physical restraint procedures, and this is another situation like with the evaluation system where the language in the CBA has not kept pace with what's really going on. There is a school board policy 5.18 that regulates what physical restraints may be used. Unfortunately, due to changes in federal or state law, we've had to change that policy more frequently than we can change this language. And originally, this language was just taken from policy. You took the policy and we put it in the contract so that the employees would have a quicker look. But now that things are all online, what we'd like to do is take out the bulk, again, the meat of this language, and have it linked to the policy. And basically it says, should the use of physical restraint be necessary, employees are required to comply with School Board Policy 5.181. And we'd have a live link there. So when you click on that School Board Policy, it would take you immediately to the policy that shows you what, in real time, is the requirements and the restrictions on physical restraint. Because if you read through this, one of the things that's talked about is supine restraints. That's not allowed any longer. So this has not kept pace with what the federal, state, and laws are, as well as the policy. And in order to keep pace, I think it's best that we just link it to the policy. So then we left in the paragraph that the board shall provide training and support, because we think that's important that the teachers know that we do provide that kind of training. And then it's the last paragraph as well we want to keep in there, and it's again about the training. It would be approved by the board. It would be only given by people who are certified to give that type of training. we just want to protect our teachers, because if they follow the language in this, they could get into serious trouble because it violates the school board policy. So while it doesn't violate the CBA, it would violate the law and the policy. So we'd like you, again, give serious consideration to let's clean this out, because we just can't keep pace with, we only meet once a year and the federal law changes twice in 1 year. We're going to have errors in this, and I don't want our employees to be concerned and get caught by using this rather than what's in policy and law. Okay, so then we get to Article 4, Section C. It's the voluntary transfer period. We've heard your requests in the past about trying to loosen this up a little bit, because this language does go back to when we had PSCs, so you couldn't voluntarily transfer until you've had 3 years. We'd like to open it up, but we need to have it open just a little bit, not as broad as everybody would like at this point, because we still have these really hard to staff school that we're considering our high needs schools. So what we'd like you to consider changing is that adding language so that if the teacher can apply for voluntary transfer if they completed 3 years, or if they will have completed their probationary period at the time the voluntary transfer will take place. So they just have to finish their first year, and they're transferring to a high-need school from a non-high-need school. And the district would put out a list in December. We think that list might be about 25 schools that would be classified as high needs. And so if I'm in my first year and I'm teaching it, let's say schools close around here, Palm Springs Middle, and I want to transfer because I want the Glade supplement, I want to be able to make more of a difference with kids, I want to transfer to Lakeshore Middle after my first year, under this provision they could do that if Lakeshore Middle is on that list of high needs schools. And we haven't quite worked out the details, and we, if you wanted to be part of those conversations of how we're going to tag those high needs schools, maybe something like a 98% free and reduced lunch, or even a 98% free lunch. We do have schools that are reaching almost 100% free lunch at this point. So those schools, that would be something we'd consider as to what would constitute a high needs school. But we do want to open it up to allow teachers, our less veteran teachers, to be able to transfer into these schools that we're having difficulty finding teachers for. The only other changes on the second page, we've changed, area superintendent to regional, just to clean up that language. So now on to our 2 appendices that we're proposing to change. In Appendix B, it's the supplements. The first change is on page 2. It's under Category 6. Right now we have 1 per school district of a school psychology intern supervisor. We created an internship program through our ESE department in conjunction with some of our universities, and I'm not sure which, but where we would have interns working for us as part of their matriculation in college. This program has been pretty successful. We want to increase that to 3 per district, because the number of school psychology interns has increased, and also with the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas Act, we're going to be bringing in more school counselors, more school psychologists. We want to be able to kind of grow our own through this program. If we can have 2 additional of these intern supervisors, that would be really helpful for us. Then the last change is on the last page, page 5. We want to add a new supplement called an academic coach. This would be at all levels. Again, it would most likely be at our high needs schools in those 25. What we want to do is offer classroom teachers an opportunity to help the teachers at their own school with professional development, lesson plans, and modeling instruction. So in these high needs schools, we could offer a $2,500 per year to academic coaches, and they would have to lead 3 professional development sessions with the staff. They'd have to have 10 open classrooms, where these are 10 days that I'm going to be providing some kind of innovative instruction, and I'm going to allow other teachers who are on, during their planning period or during relief time or whatever, to come in and watch me do this type of instruction to get that mentoringship piece. And then also that they would prepare 5 lesson plans throughout the year that they could give to staff to say, okay, we're all doing whatever subject this is or this topic, here is a lesson plan that it's innovative and it provides different kind of differentiated instruction and different type of things for the kids, and it's really worked for them in the past. Then the other supplement would be $5,000, and it would just increase those things to 6 PDs, 15 open classrooms, and 10 lesson plans. Is there any questions about that? Okay. So again, that's our high needs schools. It would be in 2 sections where we would put that list out in December. This year we'd probably put it out as soon as we possibly could, figuring out what those high needs schools would be. But we figured we'd start at about 10%, which would be about 25 schools. No more, I would say no more than 25 schools. So the last change we want to make is Appendix M. We've talked about this. Currently, Appendix M is the MOU we have for the extended instructional day for our low 300 elementary. We've talked about ways of getting into the contract. I felt that this may be just the quickest, easiest way to try and get this into as a current part of the contract rather than having to renegotiate it every year. And the language changes that we've had in here basically just reflect that it would be an ongoing endeavor and not just a one out. So we took the language that's currently in the MOU and made those changes. We did add that the district will provide written notification to the association of the schools that are so designated as those low 300 or whatever DOE wants to call them within 2 days of us finding out. We think we've gotten the list in July previously. I had hoped we'd get it sooner, but it doesn't appear that they're in any rush to get us those because they have to wait for school grades and that whatnot to come out. So we would promise that within 2 business days we would get that list to you as well, of what schools would be on this. And I think in the past we've pretty much done that anyway. So again, the language in here that are changing, it's just instead of talking about in the first paragraph of this MOU, we talk about above or further down in this provision, just changing those types of languages so that it is more of a living document instead of just a year by year. I think that's really the only changes we've made to this. We did take out in the last paragraph on page 3, you'll notice we did take out the language, but it's just talking about the MOU would be ratified, and if this is part of the contract, it's ratified as part of the normal course of the contract. We did add in here, let me pull that, find that where that is. At the bottom of page 2, it talked about, I'm sorry, that's not it. The top of page 2 in paragraph 4. We took out, the August date, and that's in the bottom as well, where we took that out, where it's as soon as we've notified the district or the association of these dates and setting up those dates that we have currently of when teachers could apply for voluntary transfers or be a UAT if they don't want to. And then in the last paragraph on page 3, we did add that this would expire on June 30th, 2021. That's only if you're interested in it expiring. We wanted to give you that comfort of having an out should you want to renegotiate this language. But as long as DOE is doing these low 300, we'd like to have it in the contract as that's an option. So we'd like you to consider having it sunset at a certain point. But if you're comfortable with leaving it in here and we negotiate it out if necessary, then we're for that as well. We just wanted to give you that comfort level of it would end at some point. But we've been doing this for now, how many years? 5 years? Same MOU over and over again. So we'd like your consideration in making these changes. And that's all our proposals for now. If you have any questions, anybody have any questions about any of the changes?
No, not at this time.
Okay, then we'll turn it over to you to get a look at your proposals.
We only do this so I get in my steps.
Okay. Our first item is from Article 2, Section O, Children of Employees. All right. Okay, and number one, we're asking that teachers not only be able to bring their kids to the assigned schools, but those schools that feed into their assigned school or that receive students from that assigned school. Because what had happened a lot of times is kids, they'll come in at a middle school where the teacher's working, then their children moves on to high school, and they have to go to their home high school as opposed to the high school where those kids go in the program from the school where they are. And so that's what we're basically asking for in number one.
Okay.
All right. And then in 1D, we're basically removing the idea where if a teacher transfers, that the kid be allowed to move with the teacher, but yet not have to leave in the middle of the school year, regardless of whether it was a voluntary or involuntary transfer. And then in E, we're again, the notification, we're just adding in those two schools, the one before and the one after, the feeder school and the receiving school.
Can I ask you a question on 1D? So would that be for the remainder of that year or till the child matriculates? So if the teacher voluntarily transfers to another school, they would remain at that school.
They could remain at that school.
They could, and it would stay for the remainder of that school year, but not till they matriculate. We'd keep, that's the intent, correct?
You mean that if they wanted to go to the receiving school that those kids normally go to, even though the teachers moved?
No, what I'm saying, and I see the language is still there, I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. So if I'm at, I'm a teacher at Everglades Elementary, and my child is there, but their home school is, Palm Springs Elementary. If I then transfer for the start of my child's in 3rd grade, I transfer now to Wellington L. I want to keep my child at Everglades. My child would stay at Everglades only for that school year, but they wouldn't stay necessarily for 4th and 5th grade, correct?
Is that our intent?
Yeah, it says until the end of the school year.
Okay, I just want to make sure it said that, but I just want to make sure because when I heard you, it sounded a little different. Okay.
All right. Okay. All right. And then 1G on the back side deals with the cost for aftercare, for after-school childcare. And so we're asking for, it was a bonus, a discount of 25%. We're asking for a 100% discount for teachers, basically no charge.
Well, currently, your 25% discount costs the district $442,716, and that's just for the calendar year because it's done for taxes. How do you propose the district be able to pay for that and sustain the school aftercare program? Because if we give you a 100% discount, I'd have the math people figure that out, but that's over $1 million right there in aftercare that I don't know that they can afford to lose.
Well, we're asking you to consider that.
Okay.
Thanks.
you.
Anybody else?
Going to go ahead and pass it
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
Math teacher, you need scrap paper.
This is give them all out.
Yeah. Oh, you guys already getting some around. Okay. So let's see how many we got. They're all colored, yeah. Makes it easier. Oh, it's.
Yep. Thank you. Sorry. Which one? This one?
We get this one?
I thought you had that.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
We're going to start with Article 4, Section B. And the only thing we're asking in terms of changing language, you're adding a new number 3, which says that all T-bargaining unit vacancies at a school shall be emailed to that school's faculty at the same time the vacancy is posted on the school district's website. And this is just so that teachers in the school will know about vacancies, and if they're interested, they can make a bid to apply. I mean, the information is available on the website, but they may not be aware, and so we kind of want them to be aware at the same time that it goes out for the district.
Okay. That would be something that I guess that, in your thinking, would it be the district that sends that email out, or would it be the principal, as they're posting it, send it out?
The principal at the school.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
All right. And then Article 8, Section B, experience for salary defined. Right now, retired teachers, when they come back to work in the district, they're placed at step 7 or given 7 years of credit. The challenge with that is we have a placement schedule and as opposed to salary. So because we got rid of our regular schedule, it's kind of difficult to establish where retirees come in. On that placement schedule, I think they're about step 13, if I'm not mistaken, based on the salary they receive when they come in.
No, it's currently what a teacher who's been with us for 7 years receives.
I'm sorry?
It's 7.
But I think what the dollar values on the current placement schedule are not aligned with what actual teachers in those current years of experience make.
Purposely below.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So anyway, in either case, what we're proposing, our proposal kind of helps to establish how retirees will come in. And we're saying step 17 on the placement, and the error we had, we didn't say placement schedule. That's what we really meant. In there is placement schedule.
That helps.
So where it says 17 and the step on the salary schedule, it should say placement salary schedule. All right, because if you look at the placement salary schedule, you'll see that at step 17, the salary is $50,900, and so we're asking that retirees come in at that level, and of course that also would afford them more than 7 years credit, so they would have at least 10 years credit when they come in. I don't know if we need to outline that specifically, but the 17 will put them above above the 10 as it relates to the referendum.
Okay.
All right. This thing still makes noise.
We'll have to cost that one out. Yeah. Right.
I hear you. Okay.
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, that's not 45. Okay.
Okay.
Ready?
Yeah, ready.
All right. And then Article 8, Section N, the mandatory in-service. What we're asking there is that half of each PDD day be afforded to teachers to do the mandatory in-service. Because there's a whole lot of in-service activities that's required of teachers, we feel that time need to be allotted for that to take place. And we're also asking that immediately after the ratification of this agreement, that an audit be done to see what kind of time frame, how much time is required of teachers each year in terms of mandatory in-service. We know that a lot of this is state mandated, but we feel we need to do an audit to get an idea as to what kind of time is required of teachers to do mandatory in-service.
Is this, who's going to pay for the audit?
Well, it's within the district. It's whatever they,
So the district
that's
will pay
required.
for the audit?
Yeah, whatever's required. I mean, it's they're making the requirements. They send the information out to teachers, notifying that they're required to complete this in-service. And
Okay.
so whatever department notifies them of the in-service would be the department that would conduct the audit, I would assume. I don't know how that's structured, but yeah.
When we say audit, we simply mean what I think doesn't exist at this point is a list of trainings.
Okay, so you're looking
Yeah.
you're looking for a list. You're not looking
Right.
for an audit then. An audit is completely different. That's where we're bringing in third parties to come in and just
All
kind
right,
of
so
take everything
make that
apart.
clear that all we want to do is to know how many
Okay.
in-service so that we get an idea as to what kind of time is involved for teachers. That's
So you're
correct.
looking for a review.
A review. All
Okay.
right, that'll be fine.
Now for those, I just want to make it clear because my understanding is that the mandatory in-service rate of the $25 per hour is only applicable if it goes beyond their workday. So if they're getting that half day of mandatory in-service on LPD days, you're not intending for us to pay them above and beyond their regular salary.
Just allocated time during PDD days.
Okay, so we're just, it's not money, it's time.
It's time, correct.
Okay.
Also, for some reason, our program missed one of our items. And the last item, I'm glad you mentioned the $25 because we actually was asking for $45 for that mandatory in-service. So that's an error in our document.
Well, I kind of thought this may be where we're heading. You know, currently, the mandatory in-service has cost the district about $500,000 at $25 an hour. We have limited resources. We've made no secret of that. The increase we got from the governor for this school year was pathetic. So any of these changes that require money, we have one pot of money for it. So if we were to make a change, and we just changed this within the last, I would say, 4 to 5 years, we just changed it to $25 an hour, because it was sometime between 13 and 16 we changed that.
I'm sorry, Vicki, I was in error. We do have, that was not the change. This is correct.
Okay, so you still want to keep mandatory in-service at 25?
25, right. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, and then the next two items, Appendix B and Appendix D, we'll bring those for next round because we're still working on that.
Okay. We need a caucus for a few minutes just to see where we go from here. So if you would give us the room for a few minutes.
All right.
Thank you. But you're enjoying the trip, Bill.